Welcome back. It's that time of the week. It's time for another episode of The Secret Diaries of a Gay Gynecologist in Paris, a memoir. Yes, you heard right, a memoir by Rafael Herrero, MD, PhD. The Secret Diaries of a Gay Gynecologist in Paris. Caution: may contain adult language. Chapter 5. Courage. Part 1. Paris, mid-February. The waiter at Le Sancerre stared at me and my almost empty cup and tapped his foot. The black liquid at the bottom of the cup was as cold as the snow-covered pavement outside. I sipped the last drops, and the waiter rushed over. He slapped a bill on the small wooden table. 15 francs, s'il vous plaît, monsieur. I wrenched the only bill left in my wallet, and he immediately swiped to clean my table. My unemployment check was still 2 weeks away. The waiter's wolf-like fingers snatched the 20-franc note and tossed some coins on the table. Merci, monsieur. Bonne journée, monsieur, he shouted as he disappeared into the kitchen. I wrested myself out of my chair and left to the bar en Rue des Abbesses to make it back up to André's cold, tiny apartment. All of his friends were at work. Museums and movie theaters cost money. It was much too cold for any sightseeing. I'll just have to get back to typing my curriculum, I said to myself. I pulled down the wool cap over my ears. If I could only get a position as an intern, even just for a semester. The academic year was divided into semesters at French university hospitals, each starting on May 1st or November 1st. The French had come up with a fantastic idea, the idea of changing residents every 6 months, so residents could get the best of each and every teaching hospital. If only I could get a job in May. But you're not an intern, my sister Maripath had once said to me on the phone from her house in London. You're a specialist now. These words were troublesome. They came from my big sister, a blonde and blue-eyed Spanish woman, the embodiment of restraint and reason. I know, but nobody's going to give me a job as a full-fledged gynecologist here. Nobody knows me. They have to see what I'm worth first. Her sounded skeptical. And a little extra training won't do me any harm. After all, the OBGYN residency program in the U.S., most of Europe for that matter, is 4 years. In France, it's 5. So what if I spend a little extra time as a resident? I'm taking 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. I hope you know what you're doing. I trudged on to André's and looked at all the footprints people had left in the thin layer of snow on the sidewalk. Trying not to slip, I worked my way up Rue Ravignon towards André's apartment in my sneakers. El saber no culpa lugar, I repeated to myself. This is going to be scientific. This is going to be a terrific learning experience. As a resident, an interne, they'll teach me lots of things. The French would never hire foreign physicians at cheap labor. Besides, I'm an American, a European. I'm one of them. I passed a wrinkled woman sitting barefoot in the snow, staring catatonically into space with a few pièces jaunes, coins scattered before her. She looked well over 60, although she was probably in her 40s. She was the same joyous, plump lady I'd seen at Le Sancerre only 3 days ago, belting La Vie en Rose between patrons. I caught a glimpse of her dirty, crimsoning toes and marveled at the pain some schizophrenics could endure. After hours of rereading and rewriting my CV under the mezzanine as if the future of the universe depended on well-placed commas, I got up from the wooden chair, watching my head, and took 2 steps to the window next to the sofa for dwarves. Still snowing. I felt the cold creeping in, unhindered by the thin, century-old window panes. My head was turning. I needed to talk to a human being. I hadn't heard from André all day. I couldn't call. He hated that. From my vantage point at the street window, I looked at the back end of the apartment, only 10 steps away. Beyond the hallway, which was also a kitchen, was a tiny cul-de-sac with a window into the courtyard and the door into the bathroom. The silence was cut by the building shifting, and my glance fell on the phone lying on the miniature TV set. Mute, it peered at me defiantly, daring me to call my friends abroad. But no, too expensive. I couldn't do that to André. I stared out the window, studying the small snowflakes as they coalesced with the thin bed of snow on the pavement. Suddenly, the phone piece jingled. I lunged and seized it. The line was dead. Just the telephone system instructing me to set it back into its cradle. Disappointed, I followed its orders and got myself a cup of tea. Back at the small pine desk under the mezzanine, I continued to struggle with André's PC and its French keyboard. The letters and symbols were all placed differently. Even the period, one of the most used symbols, needed a shift cap to be entered. If the French had found a better way of doing things, there must be a reason, even if it wasn't simpler. Pourquoi faire simple quand on peut faire compliqué? I chuckled as I recalled the French saying, a rare instance of the French making fun of themselves. Indeed, why should we make things simple when we can make them complicated? I wrung my cerebral cortex for more things to put on my CV and then translated them into French. I turned around to look at the phone. I was sure it was going to ring. It stared back at me stoically, most of the time mockingly. I got up to see if it had become unplugged or if poor André had been trying desperately to get a hold of me. I beeped it on and off, working like a Rolex. After a few hours, I finally pushed myself up from the wooden chair. Could I really fool anybody into hiring me? My body was stiff. The tiny apartment freezing. The snow had stopped, but now the temperature had plummeted drastically. I shivered. The only heating was a small ceramic furnace in the center of the room, beside the fishbowl-sized television. The garden stove looked like something Lavoisier would have used in the 1700s. I opened its leaf-green trapdoor and tried to remember André's instructions on how to light a fire. I cursed myself and wondered if I'd learned anything at all during my many years as a California Cub Scout. I crumpled some newspaper and stuffed it into the trap, placed some chopped-up logs on top, lit a match, and ignited the pages of Le Canard Enchaîné, a leftist newspaper that humorously denounced all the government's actions, but so full of argot expressions I couldn't understand a thing. First blowing gently, then angrily, then imploringly, I huffed and I puffed, cajoling the logs into burning. I coughed in phtisic fits, much better at producing charcoal smoke than flames. I crouched in front of the old chimney and sighed. I looked at the clock. It was only 6 o'clock. Still, no call from André. I couldn't help myself. I grabbed the phone to call my cousin Jorge in Spain. He was struggling, like myself, to make a living as a young physician. Spain had a rampant 20% unemployment rate in the 1990s, and doctors were no exception. Jorge, or Jordi, whatever, had decided to stay put in Barcelona, where his family was. His father was a reputed urologist who had performed the first sex change operations in Spain, and Jorge hoped to make it for himself as a weenie doctor as well. I told him I just moved to France to give it a whack as a gynae. "Wow, Rafael, I really admire your courage," he said. "Courage? What do you mean?" I wondered if he was going to make a wisecrack about the courage it takes to look at pussies all day. "I would have gone to England, though," he said. A few crackles came over the phone. "Besides, your sister's there. Why didn't you go there?" "It was the complicated option, Jorge." "Yep, a gynae with balls." "Courage is just ignorance," a college student told me once at the Midnight Sun, a gay bar in San Francisco. I listened to the guy in the Santa Cruz sweatshirt sipping my whiskey and Coke, my favorite drink, while the Dynasty reruns played on the giant video screen behind him. When you think of it, Those macho men we think are so brave, he went on, they're not being brave at all. They're just plain stupid. They don't know what they're getting into. They don't realize they might be killed in the battle. Killed. Dead. Muerto. He took a swig of his Coors. Muerto. They just don't get it. I looked at the video screen, and although I saw Joan Collins, I thought of Joan of Arc, France's greatest national heroine. I wondered if Joan of Arc had been brave fighting to drive the English out of France, or if she had just been ignorant. Had she realized that she might be burned at the stake? Or was she an admirable lesbian, stronger and bolder than her fellow soldiers? Perhaps she was, as suggested in several of my genetic courses, a mishap that included Y chromosomes sprinkled among her cells, making her a strong, aggressive woman, fueled by the extra testosterone in her body. Dead at the age of 19. Did she die because she couldn't get around her impulses? Maybe she'd resorted to the honorable alibi of defending the king to continue to cross-dress and act like a man. Are gays being brave when they give in to their sexuality? Or are the impulses too strong to see the difficulty homosexuality will make life for them? I watched Alexis Carrington Colby scheme in her Nolan Miller nightgown, holding a half-empty martini glass. Camp, excess, decadence, and glamour. What kept America glued to that TV screen had made me move to France. To my surprise, Jorge carried on telling me about how he envied me for my valentía, my eggs, my guts. I kept to myself how I envied him for having a physician for a father, connections, or at least the access to the unpublished tricks of the trade from an experienced insider. Nevertheless, it was nice to feel the love of someone who admits envying you, even if you don't agree with them. So sweet of you, Jorge, I said, but hey, if I can finally put my foot in the door here, you can count on my help. If you're interested, that is. I placed the cold receiver down and stared in irritation at the frigid Franklin stove. How am I going to get this damn thing burning? Better not call André. He's going to get furious with me for being such a dimshit. With no matches in the family-sized matchbox, and ashes covering my face and spreading through my bronchioles and alveoli, I put on another thick sweater. The phone rang. Salut! André sang into the line. Well, at least he's in a good mood. Ça va? I chimed in fake good spirits. I thought you had forgotten me. Rafael, I am at the office, he replied. Well, you could at least call me on your breaks. Rafael, I am working. I don't have breaks. I scrunched my lips. Surely, if he loved me, he'd find the time for a quick telephone call, right? I just called you, he said, to tell you that I'm going to be late tonight. I gotta stay at the office. Don't wait for me for dinner, alrighty? Okay, goodbye. Bisous, I said quickly, hoping he'd blow back kisses. But he had already hung up.
Et bien voilà, mes amis, c'est tout pour aujourd'hui. That's it for today, my friends. Join me for our next show of The Secret Diaries of a Gay Gynecologist in Paris, a memoir by Rafael Herrero, MD, PhD. Contact me at Rafael Herrero, RAFAEL.HERRERO.SF, like in San Francisco, at gmail.com. Au revoir. À la semaine prochaine et vive Paris!
If you liked today's episode, would you please like my Facebook page? Search for A Gay Gynecologist in Paris. Please give me a hand and follow me as well on Twitter at